Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jonathan, and in today's video we are looking at two multifunctional headlights. One is from Olight, the other from a less well-known company called Armytek. They compete head-on in the marketplace, but which is best?
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
So Armytek reached out to me a few weeks ago to ask me if I would review their latest and most powerful head torch, which is the Wizard C2 Pro Max, and I said I would if I could compare it directly with the competition, which is the Olight Perun 2. I then got hold of Olight and said would they mind sending me one. So this is a proper head-to-head battle from two different manufacturers of a product that sits exactly in the same market space. So it's going to be really interesting to compare features and quality and to see which is best. So Olight, a lot of us are already familiar with. They make a lot of EDC flashlights, which are well received, and they are based in China. Armytek, on the other hand, are based in Germany, in Berlin. They claim to use US and Japanese components, but also assemble in China. Both companies have been around since 2007. And both companies claim to offer top quality and technologically advanced flashlights. The Armytek comes in very colourful packaging with lots of information on the box. There is less information on the Olight, but nevertheless it's still nicely presented, and this is a very tough box. This one is a little bit more flimsy. Both look really good in their own way. So what's in the box? Well, the Armytek comes with a headband, so it can be used as a head torch. Also comes with some basic instructions, a couple of spare O-rings, pocket clip, a bike mount, so you can use this as a flashlight on your bike, a magnetic charging cable, so it's a bespoke charging cable. So the flashlight is designed to work with a 21700 rechargeable battery. However, with this adapter, you can also use an 18650 battery. So that's something I've not seen used before. So with the Olight, you get the flashlight, you get a basic instruction manual, you get a belt clip as well, and also Olight's proprietary magnetic charging system. You get the headbands, so the light can be used as head torch. You get a wrist strap. So pretty much what we've got in both cases is a head torch, charging cable, and the flashlight and pocket clip. Okay, there's a lot of similarities here. They both use the 21700 battery, but interestingly the Armytek's battery is 5000 milliamp hour, whereas the one provided with the Olight is only 4000 milliamp hour, so that will definitely affect the duration. That is a plus point for the Armytek. Both flashlights have the same right-angled form factor, which is a really nice way to hold a flashlight. So if you're carrying it in the hand, you can hold it like this, which is really convenient. With the addition of the headband, it can also become a head torch. So that is another benefit of this form factor. And also with the clip, it can clip onto a pack, and then you've got a different way of carrying it. In terms of size, they're almost identical as well. They're 120 millimeters long, give or take a millimeter, and depending where you measure it, about 30 mil wide. In terms of weight, with the clip-on, they're both about 160 grams, give or take a gram. So they're almost identical on both size and weight. The finish is very different, as you can see. The Armytek has a matte finish, which feels really nice in the hand. It's not slippery in any way. You feel like you've got a good grip on it. And the design is relatively minimal compared with the Olight. The Olight has got fins and knurling at all sorts of different angles. And it depends what you like. I am thinking perhaps Olight might have overdone it a little bit with the amount of detail on this, although some of you will no doubt really like it. So that's purely down to what you personally prefer. When it comes to resilience, there is a bit of difference. The Olight supports a 1.5 meter drop test, which is pretty good, and it's IP68, which means it can be submerged. However, the Armytek seems to take it to the next level, and they say this can be submerged up to 10 meters. That is quite unusual to be able to take a flashlight to a depth of 10 meters. So that's one for Armytek. The other thing is the Armytek says it can withstand a 10 meter drop test. Not a major factor unless you really plan to give it some abuse, but definitely worth noting. And the other thing that's interesting is Armytek give this a 10-year warranty, whereas Olight give this a 5-year warranty. Both flashlights have what they call a TIR lens. That stands for total internal reflection. And what that means is the lenses have been designed to maximize the light source. So it'll be interesting to see the beam pattern. You can see that the Olight has more of a clear reflector. That is also backed up by the fact that the beam distance on the Olight is greater. The maximum beam distance is 166 meters for the Olight, whereas the maximum beam distance for the Armytek is 114 meters. And you can see, looking at the Armytek, that they have a different lens setup here. More micro lenses going on as part of the TIR setup. So we'll compare the beam patterns with some night shots a little bit later in the video. And then the other thing to mention is the price. Both of these are around about $100, which equates to about £90 in the UK, including tax. Other quick things to note is that the Olight comes in orange as well as black. And the Armytek has a warm LED option as well as this LED, which is a white LED. In terms of the switch, the positioning is different on the two lights. The Armytek has a switch on the side, which is nice and clicky and rubberized, and the Olight has a switch on the top, which is also very nice to press and a rubberized feel to it as well. Given the choice, I would probably go for the Olight, but both of them function and feel really good. You'll notice the Armytek has a little flashing light in there, which I'll come to in a moment. The Armytek feels the need to put a little bit of writing on the top, talking about the name, the fact that it's a white light and a hot surface. Question whether that's really necessary. They also feel the need to tell you that it's got a magnetic USB charger. I'm not sure that's the sort of thing you'd forget actually and need reminding of. So I think that's a little bit unnecessary. In terms of quality, they both feel really good. They both have magnetic charging on the base. If we look at the clips that come with it, the Olight can clip in one of two locations, or probably three locations actually. It feels really strong, the clipping. You'll notice it's in an S shape, so it can go on that way or that way. The Armytek, again, there's several areas where it can be positioned. So that's easy to put on and take off. This one also, but both pretty much hold in place really well. And as I've already mentioned, they would clip onto a pack. They would also slide into molly webbing, a nice addition to both flashlights. So let's get into the different light modes and the battery duration. So the Armytek has a general mode which closely matches the Olight modes, and we'll go through that. But it also has what they call an advanced mode. I'm not sure why they've made it this complicated. Some people might like the extra functionality and the extra modes, but it gets to the point where you're starting to create a level of complexity that just becomes confusing and definitely difficult to remember. And you don't really want to be carrying a manual around just so you can operate your flashlight. Nevertheless, let's have a look at the modes. This is in general mode, so an easy to use mode. Let's compare that with the Olight, and we're going to look at the Firefly mode first. So both flashlights, if you press and hold the switch, it will go straight into Firefly mode. So press and hold and it's on, press and hold and it's on. Firefly mode is really useful. It's a very low light level, and it means you can find your way around in total darkness particularly in confined areas, without waking other people up around you, or you can create a small level of illumination without destroying your night vision. So it's great to have that. The other thing about Firefly mode is if you are running short of battery power, or you know you're going to need the light for a long time and you want to preserve the battery, Firefly mode uses very little power. For example, in this Firefly mode, because the Armytek has 2 levels of Firefly, just to complicate it a little bit more, but in this low level it will last continuously on one charge for 64 days. The Firefly mode on the Olight is 1 level, and that 1 level is 5 lumens, and at 5 lumens this will last for 12.5 days, so still quite a lot. The Armytek has 2 levels of Firefly. This is the very lowest, which is 0.6 of a lumen, but if you press and hold it, it will jump up to the next level of what they call Firefly mode. This is 7 lumens, and this will last continuously for 10 days. So actually quite a bright level of light. And if you were desperate to conserve battery power and still needed a light, this would be a great mode. In both cases, you just press once to switch it off. And both of these flashlights remember their last setting. So press it back on, and it comes on at the same level as before, which is again ideal. Then we have the main light modes, and to get into those, if you press to bring it on and then keep the switch held when it's on, it starts to cycle through the main modes, and there's 3. So there we have 1, 2. So there we have 1, 2, 3, low, medium, high, and the same is true here. You switch it on, then press and hold 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you cycle through. And when you get to the light level you want, you let go. And that's quite easy to do. You've only got 3 to choose from, so it's fairly easy to select the one you want. And it's similar for both. Now the light levels we've got to choose from in the Olight is 30 lumens, and that lasts for 66 hours. We've then got 120 lumens, and that lasts for 8 hours. And then we have 500 lumens, and that lasts for 4.5 hours. The Armytek goes, the lowest main light level is 45 lumens, and that lasts for 64 hours. Then we have 150 lumens, and that lasts for 21 hours. And then we have 450 lumens, and that lasts for 7 hours. So both really usable if you are out and about all night long and you need to get yourself around in the dark. You can be guaranteed at least 18 hours at a really reasonable brightness level. So if we pick the mid level, which is 120 lumens on the Olight and 150 lumens on the Armytek, both offer a reasonable level of brightness to get around in the dark and a really long battery duration. And that's what I like about this form factor that enables you to carry a 21700 battery. That is, you got a head torch without an additional remote battery, which lasts for hours and hours. And I think that's a really practical thing, particularly when you can take it off the headband and use it as a normal torch. So a really good range of light levels that are really practical. And you'll note none of these light levels step down at any point. They can be run consistently. And then we have turbo mode. The turbo mode on the Olight is 2,500 lumens, which is pretty bright. The turbo mode on the Armytek is 4,000 lumens. So it has a much higher maximum power output, albeit in both cases, like you see with a lot of flashlights these days, when you're looking at high power levels, both of these will only operate at those high brightness levels for a short period of time before stepping down. So in the case of the Olight, you can run at 2,500 lumens for 2 minutes, and it will step down to 800 lumens, and it can maintain that 800 lumens for 2 hours and 55 minutes. In the case of the Armytek, the 4,000 lumens will last for 50 seconds. Both flashlights get extremely hot when you drive in a single LED at that level of brightness, and it needs to shut down to protect the battery and also to protect the LED module. When it steps down, the Armytek will then run at 900 lumens for 3 hours and 15 minutes. So how do you switch it on to turbo? Well, in the case of the Armytek, you switch the light on first, which we have, and then you double press the switch, and then it comes on at 4000 lumens. And then if you then press and hold the switch, it then drops down and cycles through the 3 main modes, and then press to switch it off. In the case of the Olight, you can simply double press the switch. You don't have to bring the flashlight on first. So if I double press the switch, that's on at 2500 lumens. And then you again press and hold, and it will start to step through the different modes again. So relatively easy to get to the turbo modes. The Olight has an SOS mode, and to get to that you press the button 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then it flashes SOS. Now the Armytek has a similar mode and a few others, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because if you want to get to the other modes you need to switch the flashlight into advanced, and to do that you unscrew the base by half a turn, which disconnects the battery, I think. Then you press the button on the back and turn it back on. So now we're in advanced mode with the Armytek. Let's quickly run through the way it works now, which is different from before. Again, it's quite simple when you've got your head around it, but it just gets a bit complicated when you're trying to work out what mode you want to be in, what mode you're actually in, and how to switch from one mode to the other. So in advanced mode, you press and hold, and you get into Firefly mode. And then when you press and hold it, it cycles between the 2 Firefly levels. Press once to switch it off. Double press, and you're now in the main light modes. Press and hold, and it'll step through the different ones, of which there are 3, which is fine. Press once to turn it off. If you want to get into turbo, you press 3 times, 1, 2, 3. Now we're in turbo, but there are 2 turbos now. So press and hold, and it will cycle through the 2 different turbo modes. Press once to switch it off, and then you've got a 4 button press. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're now in, I guess you'd call it emergency mode. It's now just flashing very brightly, but there are 3 modes here. Press and hold, and we go into flashing, but at a much lower light level. So this will last for, I think, 90 hours at this level. So that's probably how you'd leave it if you wanted to get picked up and you were lost while you were, say, sleeping. And then if you press and hold again, it'll cycle through to strobe mode, and press it to switch it off. So you've got added functionality, but you've also got added complexity, and that kind of separates these 2 flashlights, as we'll start to see. A couple of other things to know on the interface. If you want to lock out the Olight, you can. You press and hold, and it goes through Firefly and then switches off. Now when you press it, it won't bring the flashlight on permanently. It will just come on when you press it, which is interesting in itself. If it got pressed permanently in your bag, it would come on, because to take it out of lock mode you just press and hold the button, and now it's back on again. Having said all that, if you bring it into one of the brighter modes, let's say the turbo, that would be potentially dangerous if that came on in your pocket, but it's got a sensor on the front of the lens, and if I bring something close, you'll notice the light has dimmed down. When I take it away, it comes back on. Let's show it here. Bring it down, and all of a sudden it dims, come away, and it comes back on again. If I put it in high bright mode, it does the same. If I bring it here, it suddenly dims down, come away, and it suddenly comes back up again. You can see that transition, and that's a useful feature because it is quite easy to switch it on in your pocket, as is this one. This one can easily come on in your pocket. It would have to be double pressed to bring it on to a very high brightness mode, but there is a way of avoiding it coming on at all with both flashlights, and this is what Armytek recommend, and that's just to turn the base half a turn. Now it is totally switched off. There is no danger of that going on in your luggage or in your backpack. And the same is true here. You just unscrew it quarter of a turn and then it won't come on at all. And for me, that is the safest way of locking it out, and it's very easy to remember. You can do it with gloves on, and it's a very simple way of guaranteeing that the light won't come on in a pack by just knocking against something. Okay, let's just quickly compare the switches on both flashlights. This one has a flashing light every 4 seconds, and that's an interesting feature. The idea there is you could find the flashlight in the dark, so if there's a total power outage or a failure of the lighting, you will see this flashing. You can turn the flashing off. Again, you need a very good memory to work out how. If you want to turn that flashing off, you unscrew the base quarter turn, press the button, screw the base back in, and then unscrew it again, and then it will switch that off. Both buttons are easy to press, nice and clicky. As I've mentioned before, the Armytek switch has this light built into it, and this helps you understand the battery level and the temperature level of the flashlight. And it's overcomplicated. This is the sort of thing that is really difficult to learn. I have it written down here because it's impossible to remember. If your battery level is 25% or less, it will flash orange once every 2 seconds. If it's below 10%, it will flash red once a second. If the temperature is at 1 in level, it flashes orange 3 times in 2 seconds, and if it's at critical temperature level, it flashes red 3 times in 1 second. So I'm not going to remember all that. So what does the Olight do? Well, it doesn't tell you about the temperature because, let's face it, you don't really need to know. It'll step down automatically if it's getting too hot. And what about battery level? Well, it simply briefly vibrates every 30 seconds when the battery level drops below 10%. And I really like that, because if you've got it on your forehead where you can't see any flashing lights anyway, you can feel the indication that the battery's starting to get low, and that means you can then maybe switch it down a bit to preserve the battery life. If you think I've got a couple of more hours in the dark yet, then you could switch it down to a different level. Whereas this could be flashing red all day long, and if it's strapped to your head, you're never going to see it until the light just kind of quits. So it's interesting. Here you've got a very simple solution that will work whether it's strapped to your head or in the hand. Here you've got a very complicated set of flashing lights that you'll never remember in a million years, that doesn't actually offer the real benefit, which is letting you know without fail that it's below 10%, and therefore you need to do something to maintain your battery life. Okay, let's quickly look at the batteries in each one. This one is the Olight, and we have a 21700, but you'll notice it's 4000 milliamp hours. This one, the base screws off on the Armytek. It's got a few more turns. You'll notice it also has 2 O-rings there, which is probably part of the reason why it can withstand 10 meters underwater. Another 21700, but this time 5000 milliamp hour. Interesting to note that with the Armytek, you have a spring at this end and a spring in the tail cap. And that's helpful because if you subject this to an impact when it's in use, it can momentarily break the connection if you drop it and you don't have a double spring, and then the light could shut off. Not great if you've just dropped it in total darkness. The double spring maintains the connection with the battery even if it gets a shock. So that's something to note. A lot of tactical flashlights have the double spring. The Olight doesn't have the double spring. It's just got a solid contact at that end. Okay, let's look at charging. Both come with a bespoke magnetic tail cap charger, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing about that is that you've got to make sure you've got this cable with you, whereas if you had a USB-C port, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a USB-C charger on you somewhere. So that's worth bearing in mind. The benefits are it's really convenient and easy, and you've got some lighting here built in. So the Olight is very simple. and you can see there's a green glow there to say the power's on, and it attaches like that. This one is fully charged, so it's staying green, but if it was charging it would switch to red. The Armytek is the same principle. You've got light showing through the back here. It's bigger and a little bit bulkier, and actually the cable's a bit thicker, and that might be a good thing in terms of resilience. But then it gets a bit more complicated, like everything around the Armytek is a little bit more complicated. So you get more information from the lights on the back of this magnetic charger, but you've got to remember what it all means. So that flashing red means it's not charging, because this will only charge when it's unscrewed quarter of a turn. So now it's flashing to say it's measuring the voltage, and then it goes red, which means it's charging. So that's good, and it goes green when it's fully charged. So if it's flashing green, it's measuring the voltage and waiting to connect. If it's flashing red, it means it's not connecting, and therefore you need to check the connection or unscrew the tail cap by quarter of a turn. If it's solid red, it means it is charging, so that's a good thing. And if it's solid green, it means it has charged. If it happens to blink orange, it means the voltage is low or there is a faulty connection. And if there's a solid orange, it means the current from the charger is too low. So again, good luck remembering all of that. It points to the fact that there's a lot of functionality built into the Armytek, but you've got to remember what all of these things mean. And when you've had this flashlight in your drawer for 6 months and get it out for the winter, and you go on a hike and you've got all these flashing lights everywhere, you've got to try and remember what it all means. The Olight does it in a very different way. It just tells you that red is charging and green is charged. In terms of time to charge, the Olight charges in 3.5 hours, and the Armytek charges in 5 hours and 20 minutes. You might think that's a real win for the Olight, but don't forget the battery in the Armytek is 5,000 milliamp hour rather than 4,000 milliamp hour, so it is going to take longer to charge. And the benefit of that is you get the longer battery duration. Okay, let's check out the headbands. They are both designed to be head torches, so this is quite an important feature. Both flashlights do it in a slightly different way. Let's look at the Armytek first. So they have a headband like this, and you can go right or left. You've got the grooves here which show you where to position it, and then you just push it in place, and as you can see, it simply turns. And that works really well. And then just as extra security, you have an elastic kind of bungee cord thing there to hold it in place. And then if I put it on, the great thing about having the switch on the side, which you have with the Armytek, is you can very easily switch it on with one hand. So the Armytek headband is pretty comfortable. It doesn't feel heavy on the head. I know it's quite a big flashlight, but it seems to fit really well. And I think it's pretty good. Okay, let's compare the Olight. The Olight does it in a slightly different way. It's got a much more rubberized holder here, and you slide that in there, and I think the idea here is you pull that over there, and again it slides it into the notches, so you don't really want the belt clip on when you do this. Let's put that on the head. There we go. So it's a little bit easier to turn, which I probably prefer. But if you wanted to use one hand, you have to kind of grab it with 2 fingers and press it with one hand. Not too difficult, if I'm being honest. So there you go. So in terms of the overall comfort on that, the Olight might be a little bit more comfortable because you've got a little bit more surface area against your head. There's not a lot in it, to be honest. It kind of comes down to personal preference. Both are good solutions. I actually think the Olight is perhaps a little bit neater. And to get them out, you just pull that off there and then slide it. This one, you just simply undo the bungee and then pull it out. So both good solutions, both work really well. So the only thing left to do is to get them outside in the dark and see how they compare. Okay, here we have the Olight at 30 lumens. And then this is the Olight at 120 lumens. And then this is 500 lumens at its highest brightness setting in the main modes. And you'd be very happy with that if you're out walking. So here we have the Armytek, and this is 45 lumens. This is 150 lumens. And this is 450 lumens, its highest setting on the main modes. You can see straight away that the light on the left, which is the Olight, has a focused beam, and on the right, which is the Armytek, is a spread beam. So that you clearly see the difference between the two. If we try it on this hedge here, on the left we have the Olight with a more focused beam with a hot spot, and on the right you have a very spread beam from the Armytek. If we look at it again up the road, this is the Olight, very clear beam reaching further, and that's the Armytek, closer range, more spread. Olight, and then the Armytek. Okay, now we're going to look at the turbo mode. This is 500 lumens on the Olight, and we're switching now to 2,500 lumens, which is its maximum turbo mode, and it will run at this level for 2 minutes before stepping down. Now we are looking at the Armytek at 4,000 lumens, and this will run for 50 seconds before it steps down. And you can really start to see the difference between the two here. That's the Olight, and that's the Armytek. And the Olight clearly has a beam that reaches further, and that has a hotspot and peripheral light either side, whereas the Armytek is a much more flat light. You can move it around and you don't see the beam moving around as you do with the Olight. So the Armytek is spread even light, and the Olight here is a hotspot with a longer reach beam. So here is the Olight on a brick wall 8 meters away, and this is the Armytek. You can see the Armytek has a very diffused spread light, very flat, and you can see the wall evenly lit. And it also has a wider peripheral light spread. And then with the Olight, you've got a much brighter center and obviously a stronger beam. So against this white wall, you can see here is the Olight at 2,500 lumens, and then the Armytek at 4,000 lumens. Both actually look very similar in terms of light levels in real life. Okay, what I'm looking for in a flashlight is a bright light so I can see around me, a good beam distance so I can see ahead, and a long battery duration so I can run it all night if I need to. So in conclusion, on paper the Armytek should be the winner here. It has a brighter light level, it has more features, it has more modes. However, it's all down to the beam pattern, and in real world use I much prefer the beam from the Olight. As you'll have seen from the night shots, the Armytek beam pattern is really flat. And that can be good, I think, for some people. When you move your head around, there isn't a beam to move around, so it's a very stable light source, and that might make for a relaxed night walk. However, I do like a beam. I like to see a light shining where my head's pointing. I like to see into the distance, and I much prefer the beam pattern from the Olight. In addition to that, the TIR lens on the Armytek seems to restrict the power output to some extent, because at 4,000 lumens it doesn't look any brighter than the Olight at 2,500 lumens, and you can see that on the night shots. At that high light level, the Armytek will run for 50 seconds before dropping down, whereas the Olight will run for 2 minutes before dropping down. The other challenge with the Armytek, as you'll have seen, is that it's extremely complex, overly complex to use. The Olight is intuitive, and I can pick this up and within 30 seconds I'll have worked out what it does. It has all the light modes I need. It has a firefly mode, one is fine. It has 3 light levels, that's perfect for me. It has turbo mode, and it has the SOS mode, which I don't really know how useful that is, to be honest, but it's there if you need it. The Armytek, on the other hand, has a lot more modes, and it's a lot more complex to work through, and I would need the manual to understand it. I can't just pick this up and use it. And the same is true of the battery level indicator. The Armytek has an LED that has all sorts of different colors and flashing cadences that tells you different things about the battery level and the heat buildup in the flashlight. I don't really need all that information. I just need to be clear on when the battery is running low, and the Olight does that really well by vibrating when the battery level gets below 10%. That also means I can pick it up if it's strapped to my head. And when it comes to charging, the Olight has a red light for charging, a green light for charged, whereas the Armytek has a mix of red, green and amber, and flashing and constant. And again, I'd need to get the manual out to understand what that was all about. So the Olight wins because I prefer the beam pattern. The light levels look very similar. Even the battery duration is not too far off, so you're not losing a lot with the smaller battery on the Olight. And the complexity of the Armytek goes against it, whereas the Olight is simple and intuitive to use. So they're both great headlamps or head torches, but the one I would take with me, and my winner out of these two, is the Olight Perun 2. So there you have it. I hope you found that interesting. Please give this video the thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. It really helps the channel. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.